What is the feature-length podcast? Anyone?
The feature-length podcast is a show where three idiots talk about film and entertainment.
Good answer.
Hey guys, what's up?
Hey, are you talking to us?
Yeah. I'm talking to the voices in my head.
Like, I truly don't know. It felt like a fever dream. I swear to God, I could not
It sounds so
make this shit
stupid
up.
hearing that.
If you're listening to this is a podcast.
Welcome back to the feature-length podcast.
Welcome back to the feature-length podcast.
Welcome back to the feature-length podcast, a podcast where we talk about movies and TV for a feature length of time.
Hello, listeners. Our dearest gratitude goes out to you all for your generosity in giving us your time and consideration for the past 2 years. That's right, this episode celebrates our 2-year anniversary. From humble beginnings in 2020, when 3 friends got together to chat and connect online at the beginning of a pandemic, to a still pretty amateur setup now with those same 3 friends just sort of continuing to chat still during a pandemic also. The podcast is powered through all along. We can't express enough how thankful we are for our audience, and how much fun we have getting together for these discussions. Having what is essentially a movie club has helped each of us work on our film critiquing skills, while also giving us an outlet over which we have complete creative control. So sincerely, thank you for all of your support. As for today's discussion, we knew we needed a very significant topic for this anniversary episode. And fear not, for we have chosen one. Today, we will finally be talking about the Harry Potter series. This one's been a long time coming. Going all the way back to our first ever episode on the fantasy series The Lord of the Rings, we knew one day we'd inevitably arrive here. You could say that the prophecy foretold it years ago. To once again harken back to the Lord of the Rings episode, 2 of us have been longtime fans of the series, while one of us has experienced it in full for the first time for the show. I, being one of the hosts with a history as a fan of Harry Potter, have anticipated this day very much. I am excited to immortalize my thoughts on this franchise. But first, a brief and probably unnecessary series synopsis. Harry Potter is the story of a boy who lived. After miraculously surviving the murderous attack on his household that killed his parents, 1-year-old Harry Potter is rushed to the residence of his horrible aunt and uncles, the Dursleys, where he goes on to live an unhappy and oblivious life for the next 10 years. During the preceding weeks of his 11th birthday, Harry is sent an impossible amount of mysterious letters, and on the night of his birthday, he is then visited by a stranger named Hagrid, who reveals to him that Harry is a wizard, and that there exists a secret world of magic within his muggle world, one which he could never have imagined in his wildest dreams. Hagrid also tells Harry that it is time for him to begin his magical education at the prestigious Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, as did his mother and father, studying under the most powerful wizard of the age, Professor Albus Dumbledore. Ready to leave behind his life of sadness and abuse with the Dursleys, Harry jumps headfirst into a world teeming with wonder, adventure, and a happiness he has never known. Meeting new friends, finding new family, and discovering the magic of the wizarding world, Harry trains to follow in his parents' footsteps. But along the way, he learns that this new world can be just as grey as the one he knows, finding out the truth about his parents' killer, Lord Voldemort. When Voldemort makes a sudden reappearance, Harry and his new friends Ron and Hermione are the first to step up, to both defend their school and avenge Harry's parents. And so begins a saga of good and evil. As Harry grows into the world of magic around him, Voldemort regains his strength from that fateful night, which left him defeated over a decade prior. Throughout the years, the 2 of them become locked in a rivalry, continuing to face each other again and again. As war brews, fear begins to spread, underground rebellions form, doubt infects magical bureaucrats and politicians, and the light that once shone brightly on the wizarding world starts to dim. Taking the fight to Voldemort and his forces, Harry and the allies he has made come to realize the endgame is approaching, and that only one side can emerge victorious. Harry quickly grows to realize the significance of his life and what will have to be done in order to win this elemental war, as well as his role in it all. The fate of the world, both magical and muggle, lies with Harry Potter. The Harry Potter series is a party that I was admittedly a bit late to, having only taken an interest upon witnessing the massive hype around the then approaching finale of the franchise. I soon started watching from the beginning, immediately fell in love, and even finished the first 7 movies in time to experience the final film for the first time in the theater. While I certainly wish I had become acquainted with it much earlier, to this day I'm incredibly glad to have taken it upon myself to become a fan. This is a series I revisit in full at least once a year, and I still enjoy it so much that late last year into this year, I decided to finally read the Harry Potter books for the first time. I continue to find such magic and wonder in these films, and now I can say the same for the books as well, and this is easily one of my top favorite entertainment franchises. But now it's time to open up the floor. Today I am joined as per usual by my two co-hosts, Karolina and Marco. Much like our premiere episode yet again, the person experiencing the films for the first time was Karolina, having only ever seen the first two movies a while ago, and never watching further until now. By process of elimination, that makes Marco the other longtime Harry Potter veteran, whose history with the series goes back even further than mine. So I'll now pass it over to him to talk about his thoughts, before Carol finally reveals to us her fresh opinions on this iconic franchise. I've been Daniel, and you're listening to the Feature Length Podcast.
Very good, Dan.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you very
Fantastic
much.
intro. You're the best intro
That was great.
of the three of us, definitely.
Thanks.
My intros are mostly just lines of dialogue no one remembers, so...
I remember them.
Yeah. Yeah, I will, I guess, go. Look, first of all, I will also just reiterate what you just said. Obviously, thank you to everyone for listening. This being the Season 2 finale, going out with a bang. Yeah, I mean, cool that people listen, I guess. But as you said, I also just like doing this because it's fun to do. And fun to talk about movies and think about movies differently and whatnot. All that good stuff. Yeah, Harry Potter. Okay. This has been an episode that I have been so excited for and yet simultaneously dreading. I have such a specific and like weird connection with Harry Potter that's very different from any other franchise that we will or have talked about, right? So there's lots of franchises that I've had like personal connections with, obviously Batman, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, Star Wars, and you know, anytime we talk about those things, like it comes up what my connections with those things are, and et cetera, but Harry Potter is like the one thing that I have like such a like profound nostalgia connection with that I actually have like a difficult time like revisiting the movies like as an adult, because as you alluded to, I have been a very long time fan of Harry Potter. Actually, I stumbled into my fandom of Harry Potter when we were all in the 5th grade. When we were in the 5th grade was when in that year, the last book was being released, and the 5th movie was coming out. So the summer of sort of 4th grade into 5th grade, I read all the books up to Half-Blood Prince at that time. And I really, really loved the books. And then sort of during 5th grade, I was just kind of rewatching those first 4 movies endlessly. I had like a DVD box set with the first 4, and literally just like every day would just like go with whatever the next one was, basically, and all the behind the scenes and all that good stuff. Yeah, and then, you know, obviously really profoundly enjoyed the 5th movie. Well, no spoiler alert. Well, when that one came out, really spoilers for my opinions on. But I profoundly enjoyed that movie when it came out, and obviously the last book came out that year. And then after reading the last book, I reread the entire series again, including the last book, which is just one big thing. Yeah, and, you know, 5th grade was a weird time because it was sort of like I've talked a lot before on the podcast about the 6th grade for our age being like the year of Dark Knight or whatever, and like that weird transitional period of like, hey, all this stuff is just like pop culture now, and so like don't worry about it. But like what a time. But previously to that, it definitely wasn't like that. And at the time, like we have a lot of friends now in our group that went to grade school with me that you know as being my friends in grade school.
Say we have a lot of friends now.
Yeah, we have a lot of friends now. We didn't before.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what I'm heading towards, though, is like the friends that we're friends with now, Dan, that I introduced, or well, not whatever you met from my grade school.
That I met through knowing that they went to grade school with you.
Yeah. Like our friendship, the way it is now, kind of like initiated in the 6th grade. Like we went to school together since kindergarten. I have been friends with them that whole time. It's not like we didn't do stuff together or whatever, but like the really close friendship kind of initiated in the 6th grade. Prior to that, I was more close as a friend with this other guy who I won't say his name. I don't know if he cares or listens, but just in case, who in the 4th grade moved away, and he was like my buddy. And so the 5th grade was like this really weird, like isolating year where I wasn't like quite as close with our other friend group yet, and he had moved away like to Bell River, which now is like who fucking cares? Yeah, but at the time, like being in the 5th grade, it was like, how am I ever gonna see this man again? Like, I can't drive. So
For context,
I really thought you were going to say he moved
yeah, for
cross
context, if
country.
you're not from
Windsor.
the area we live in, Belle River is like maybe 20 minutes away.
I mean, he went to a different school. Like that's
the big thing.
That's
yeah.
the big thing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And like, obviously, being that age, you don't have the ability to travel. We did not have port keys.
Wow,
So,
good one.
Good one.
Or thestrals.
Or thestrals. Yeah, so like, I don't know. I just have this really, like, Harry Potter was like the thing that I latched onto that year in a very profound way. And I think because the franchise is very much about isolation, and in particular, like, being in grade 5 when the movie of their 5th year in school came out. And like the theme of that book is very specifically also about isolation and how that's like fucking with Harry. It just became this very sincere connection with the franchise. And so it's one of those things that like the older I get, the harder of a time I have going back to it, because it feels like watching home movies, if that makes sense. Because like it's so like it was so intrinsically tied to me then. And so it's very nostalgic, and it's kind of like, yeah. But anyway, like all that to say that I love the books. I have always said, and I'm very curious to hear what Carol has to say, I have always said I was shocked when I met you, Dan, and I found out that you didn't read the books but loved the movies. Because I had always personally felt like, even watching the movies, I was filling in so much gaps from the books, personally. But also that was my bias. I had never existed in a world where I experienced the movies before reading the books, right? So to me, I love the movies as companion pieces to the books. I love all the actors involved. I don't think anyone's been canceled for anything.
Except J.K. Rowling.
Oh yeah, well, fuck
Not
her.
an actor,
I mean,
but the creator of the
she's
series.
not an
fuck her.
actor.
But whatever. That, I mean, you know, talented people do shitty things. Like, that's just life.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do about it?
We've talked
We've
about
talked
it
about
before.
it to death. Obviously, like, she's a piece of shit. Whatever. Yeah, so, you know, I love the actors. I love what they've gone on to do. Obviously, like, the world building of it, the music of it, like, it all just comes together in a really great companion piece way to the books. But I think I'm a fan of the books first and foremost. And I will be very interested to hear, Carol, what your thoughts are as someone who has only just experienced the movies. So take it away.
Yeah, what a beautiful transition. Okay, as aforementioned, I somehow missed every fantasy series in the last 20 years.
Yeah,
It's because you were busy watching
this
Twilight.
being one of them.
that is true, yeah.
Yeah, I saw Twilight and The Hunger Games. That, I'm on it.
Perfect.
Everything else, I'm out.
Yeah.
So yes, Harry Potter is something I fully missed. And as I get older and have encountered, obviously, many, many, many people my age who are obsessed with the series, I kind of felt like I was missing out. But it was very much I didn't watch it in the right time. I really don't think it's going to be worth trying to watch it in my mid to late 20s. So I was just okay with being that person that never saw it, especially when the shit about J.K. Rowling came out. The fact that I was able to say, fuck her, I never enjoyed any of her work, also kind of gave me a superiority complex, so that was fun. But I did have a friend in high school, as Dan mentioned in the intro, who I worked with, who was obsessed with the films and found out I hadn't seen them and insisted on watching all of them with me.
Oh, you're talking about Marco, right?
No, she's talking about someone else. I
Actually,
remember
a different
this.
friend.
Wait, but you said, as I mentioned in the intro. What do you mean?
You mentioned that I watched the first couple movies, so I'm just giving context
okay.
as to why,
Yeah.
because it
I
wasn't
thought this
of
was
my
a
own
sly.
volition.
You were making
No.
reference to Marco. Okay.
No.
This was one even I was like, I'm not going to push on Carol because like I don't know how
Thank
she's
you.
going to react to it. So
Star Wars, you pushed. This, no, you didn't.
yeah, but you fun. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, we'll talk about it one day.
Probably not.
So my friend
talk about it
tried
another day.
to show me the first handful of films, but there was an issue because every time we tried to watch them, it was usually after work, which would be like 10, 11 p.m. at night. And Marco does know I love to fall asleep during a movie if the atmosphere is comfortable enough.
Or even if it's not,
so-
really.
You have a very comfortable couch, I will say.
I do, yeah.
So I watched, in quotation marks, the first and second, and I think half of the third movie even, possibly, with this friend. But I was in and out for literally all of them. And when I went to rewatch them for this, I was pleasantly not surprised to notice that I didn't really remember anything from the first film, other than, spoiler alerts, Voldemort was on the back of someone's head.
Yep.
That's
How can you
all I
forget
remembered. Yeah. And I remembered nothing from the second film at all, and nothing from the third, so it was all new to me. But as I mentioned, since it is so big, I kind of knew everything that happened. Like, I was on Tumblr too, so I saw all the GIFs and the fan casts and all the things. So I feel like I knew all the characters and the general plot. Like, none of the names are really unfamiliar to me. Although I couldn't even remember half of them as soon as they were said, because there's just so much to this world. And because I was kind of forced to watch the first couple, watching the first one to talk about it on this podcast was a really big struggle. I was a little afraid, because I was like, okay, like, this has been something that people have tried to show me so many times, and like, everyone's so into it, and like, I kind of feel this pressure to like it, despite J.K. Rowling. I'm gonna stop saying she's the worst, but she's the worst. This is the last time I'll say it going forward. No, that's everyone's opinion here.
Her mistakes can't discredit all the people that worked on these movies and stuff.
Yes.
Exactly. We've talked about this before somewhere.
Just one final,
Yeah. So the first movie, I really, really, really struggled to get through. But I will say, even I could sense the nostalgia, because my brain immediately tried to link it to something I was nostalgic to, because I was like, oh, this feels like Hocus Pocus to me. Maybe just because there's also witches. But the vibe felt very similar. So I liked the vibe, I guess, but it was a struggle to get through. But then as I kept watching, so I watched all of them within like 7 days, I would say.
Wow.
Yeah. So as I continued watching, I got kind of more and more into all the plot lines and the characters. And there were times where there was like a little plot twist, and I would actually like be gotten by it. And I was like, ooh, I didn't see that coming. That's so exciting. And yeah, I started to kind of care about everything that happened to everyone. I remember when I initially watched the first couple movies, I was like, no offense, Harry Potter's an idiot, and I don't understand why he's the protagonist. I still don't think he probably deserves to be the protagonist, no offense. Like,
we'll talk about it.
He's just an average person.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll
That's
get there.
definitely
But no, I definitely got into the world. It did have a lot of, I guess, especially towards the end, a lot of like the stuff in the 7th movies. I'm as you know, I'm not a big like grand battle type person, so that kind of lost me. But in general, I actually by the end did enjoy watching them, and even I also, for context, I watched them across 7 days, but almost every single movie I would watch like a half of, and then the other half the next day with like a half of another movie, just to make it all work. Yeah.
Oh my god.
So it was kind of piecemeal, but I did find myself stopping halfway through a movie and the next day being like, I'm excited to see what happens.
Very good. That's a good
and
sign.
I didn't expect that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I will say this series pleasantly surprised me, and I could see myself being really into it as a kid, because even like all the magicalness of it would appeal to me, obviously. I will say though, I feel kind of bad because not knowing any of these movies or books, I have like been to Platform 9 3/4 and seen like the shop, and I've been to like Hogwarts World and Universal Studios, and so I've experienced kind of all of it as a person who didn't give a shit, and I was like, yeah, this is fine, surrounded by other people who are absolutely losing their minds. And so I kind of wish I would have been able to experience it before, and I feel kind of like bad for having experienced those things when people who truly care like haven't had the privilege. Yeah, I can go back now and I deserve it.
You've earned it.
Yeah, I've put in my time, my 20 hours. It's a lot. I will say one thing, these movies are all so fucking long, and as a person who especially like going into the first movie was really, really dreading it, I was like, I have to watch 20 hours of these films. Every single one is over 2 hours long. I was losing my mind. And that's why I had to cut them all up, or else I never would have done it. But yeah, no, I was pleasantly surprised. The performances got better as they aged, because yeah, we've talked about child actors before. It can be painful sometimes, so I am glad that they did age and did get better, because it could have gotten worse.
Age. I was worried they wouldn't age.
Yeah.
Well, people were talking. I didn't really do a lot of research, because I'm like, everyone knows everything about all of these movies. It would be a waste of my time.
Yeah.
But I did briefly start pulling up the fun facts on IMDb for the first film, and people were considering like doing the whole thing animated so they didn't have to deal with the actors aging, because at the time it was kind of rare for them to actually produce like 8 films in a row to span like stories that take place over 8 years type deal. So they thought they might have to recast and really didn't want to do that, or like they wanted to combine books into films. I'm sure the mega fans already know all this. But yeah, so they aged and kept them the same, I guess, is what I'm thankful for, and that they didn't have to replace them, because some of them got, like, shittier, because some child actors just get bad when they're older.
That is true.
But no, it worked out for the best, and I had a pretty good time. I probably would have enjoyed it more if I didn't, feel any type of time crunch. But also, in theory, I could have started this a year ago because I knew this was coming, so it's also kind of my bad.
That's fair, too, yeah. It's been on schedule for a while.
Yeah.
You're busy
I
with
had a good time.
Seinfeld. It's understandable.
Yeah.
I'm still not done that, but I'm still working through it. Almost there. But yeah, no, I had a generally good time. I have, thoughts about some characters and plot lines that I think are
absolutely
not the best, obviously. But no, overall experience, good.
Great.
Awesome.
That is wonderful, because I've been seeing your posts on Be Real, and I was expecting you to come in here and be like, fuck you guys, we're ending the podcast. Why would you make me watch this shit? So that's very nice that
I'm
you...
also pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. I think sometimes Dan and I are fully expecting you to hate something that we enjoy, which would be understandable. Like
I have.
Yeah,
I still don't like Spider-Man. Any of them.
That's totally understandable. I wasn't expecting you to hate this.
Yeah.
But I was worried, if anything, that like for someone watching it for the first time now, it would put us into perspective, like, oh, maybe these aren't actually as good as we think they are. But I'm glad that you, watching them for the first time now, can sort of confirm that we're not idiots.
Insane.
We're still liking these movies.
Yeah.
Well, I will say as standalone films, none of them honestly are great, but I think because they have the benefit of all unraveling this humongous, well thought out world and this greater story, that following that makes them feel more enjoyable. Like, obviously, just if you picked any of these movies and showed it to a critic, they wouldn't be like, oh my god, my mind is blown. But it definitely has the benefit of having the fantasy and the ongoing story.
That's also something
stay appealing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Something we should probably talk about is, I would mostly agree with you. I think there's a few movies that could be like if you singled them out, it's like, wow, this is just a great, like Prisoner of Azkaban, for example, is probably the most standalone, high quality of all these movies. Like if you just watched it alone, not as part of a series. But I also think, by the way, we'll get to rankings after we're
gonna be ranking things. Don't even worry about it.
But yeah, otherwise I would agree with you. I think, and by extension, I would not call and personally, I wouldn't call any of these movies bad. Even the ones that I dislike the most, I wouldn't go as far to say it's a bad movie.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. We've seen
it's just
bad movies.
It's just bad in relation to the higher highs of the series.
Yeah.
And like you said, Carol, they work best telling a very complex, extended story. And that's where all the fun comes from this series.
Absolutely.
Is seeing where it's going to go and seeing the evolution of the world, how it slowly gets darker and a little bit creepier. It starts out as just straight up kids movies, and then the third movie, this has been said to death, but the third movie is where the adults felt comfortable to start jumping on board, and actually, or not just taking their kids to see the movie, but also going to see the movie for themselves. So that's cool. And also one more quick thing that you mentioned, to touch on the fact that the cast stays the same throughout the whole thing, except for, of course, it was unfortunate that the actor that played the first Dumbledore passed away.
R.I.P.
We'll also talk about, Hold
on.
Did you not notice?
Oh no, this is worse than Angelo in Dark Knight.
Did you not notice that they recast
This is abhorrent,
Dumbledore?
Carol. He's a completely different character. I was gonna have a conversation about which.
We are gonna talk about this.
Yeah, which Dumbledore is better?
The two performances and
they're totally different.
Yes. How even just looks alone,
the voice, everything.
Even the most superficial aspects. I can't believe this. Anyway,
I am shocked.
Anyway.
Which movie did it?
Azkaban.
Starting with the third movie, it was a different actor.
Really?
It was Richard Harris.
It's also funny because if you watch the second half of the second movie and the first half of the third movie in the same day,
that would be so
there wasn't even a day separating.
Yes. Okay, while Carol catches her breath, let me just quickly say here, this is so funny.
One more thing I was going to say.
Yeah.
I just like how endearing it is that besides that one thing, we were able to actually keep the entire cast.
Me too.
Throughout this whole thing. And even like something as little as so Cho is this character in the 4th movie, right? And then and then also she plays a significant role in the 5th movie. And then like I think it's in the 6th movie where there's like a crowd of extras in Hogwarts and like they'll just have her and like Pravarti Patil in the crowd. Like they brought everyone back for basically specialized extra roles.
Yeah.
But I love that. I love that they went to the effort to, it's like new movie, we're bringing everyone back.
Exactly.
Even for the smallest thing.
It reminds me in that way a lot of the MCU. Like, we're talking a lot about this, like, extended story and, like, people popping up. It very much is MCU-like. Like, to anyone maybe listening to this that hasn't experienced Harry Potter, I'm sure you've experienced the MCU. Like, that's the closest comparison in terms of, like, someone that is consequential here being a cameo somewhere else or whatever, and having it be the same actor, and
just for the sake of building, like, a cohesive world that feels real.
It's so great. And, like, the fact that they were able to pull that off, the fact that everyone, absolutely, I agree, their performances get better, and like also that all 3 leads have now gone on to become like very specific in their own right and unproblematic, and also like it's so funny to me that all of them, they so fit their characters in real life. Like Emma Watson like went and got a fucking education from Harvard or Brown or something. And obviously Daniel Radcliffe is like the biggest star out of the 3 of them, and Rupert Grint owns an ice cream truck. Like that is like
I was gonna say, what's Rupert Grint doing these days? I do not see him in much.
He owns an ice cream truck.
He doesn't really act anymore.
I just need to say, right, like in relation to Carol, I'm not understanding this Dumbledore change. The funniest moment of my entire life.
They're both older men with beards. I've now looked at 2 photos and
so
I do not
different.
blame myself for this.
Even like when the costume was changed, did you
the costume is different, the voice.
Did you not look towards the face and be like, oh, that's a different face?
Carol, you have to walk. Okay.
Years pass, guys. I don't judge him for getting bored with his outfits.
I can't believe this. Okay. I just have to say that the funniest moment of my entire life is when we were all at my house binge watching the Dark Knight trilogy, and Angelo, our friend Angelo, is there, and about halfway through Dark Knight says something, I forget exactly what he said, but basically revealed to us that he thought Maggie Gyllenhaal was Katie Holmes. Like, he thought they were the same person. He's like, why does she look like so much worse in this movie or something? And we were like, Angelo, those are completely different people. Like, you have just... Like, how did you miss that? Like, they're not even remotely similar, and this maybe tops that for me now in terms of.
I think it would, yeah.
Like,
no,
Carol,
because
Katie
at least
and
with
Maggie
that one, the
Gyllenhaal
performance
so
was
different.
kind of the same. Like, it was mostly the same.
Oh my gosh!
But yeah, the performances are like very different, and we will get into.
Like,
it
here's
later.
what I'm saying, Carol. Like, I get what you're saying about like old white man with a beard. I get that, but like, if you just YouTube and watch like the scene of the first Dumbledore talking to Harry at the mirror, and then like. And then like the scene from Goblet of Fire of like, Harry, did you put your name in the Goblet of Fire? Like, if you watch those 2 scenes, like they are so different. Like, it kind of blows my mind.
Okay, can I counter that?
Yes.
Every time I hear the name Dumbledore, I realize now that I've had to look up these side-by-side photos, I am actually picturing Gandalf in my head. So, all old white men with beards in my mind are one. I'm so sorry.
Okay, that's fair.
I was introduced to too many of them in too short a time span by making me watch Lord of the Rings, and now this, and you're telling me there's 2 different older white men. I can't. Yeah. I'm so sorry.
To be fair, before I had gotten into Lord of the Rings, I also saw a trailer for The Hobbit and thought the actor that played Dumbledore played Gandalf.
Yeah, they look so similar.
But also, the second actor, not the first Dumbledore
not the first.
actor.
Fun fact, Ian McKellen, who plays Gandalf, was offered the role of Dumbledore.
Should have taken it. It really would have helped me.
Yeah, after the original Dumbledore passed away, though. Like, so after the second movie, they were like, why don't you come in? And basically he had said that, like, I think he said he felt bad doing it because he was friends with the original Dumbledore or something, and he was like, I don't know, that's weird. Like, I don't want to like do that to his memory or something like that, if I remember correctly.
He would have made a good Dumbledore.
He would have made a fantastic. I mean, Ian McKellen should be in everything. Like,
I thought it was him the whole time.
So, all right, let's get back to talking about the more specific.
You really
things.
got me there. I really had no idea.
Yeah, that was a fantastic.
That was hilarious.
That was great.
Before we do this, though, should we now take a quick aside to reminisce a little bit about our favorite and least favorite season 2 podcast episodes before we dive into the actual
Let's do it,
discussion?
because that is such like a feature-length podcast moment. I feel like just like us trying to have a conversation about something, and then just like this thing of like we've all had those moments of like, oh, okay, whatever. Like none of us are experts on anything, so classic FLP moment. Hashtag classic FLP. Yeah, guys, what do you think about season 2? What are everyone tweet at us, hashtag FLP.
Don't even have
what are
Twitter.
the highs and lows? No, you can tweet at me and Carol. Tweet at Carol and myself personally.
We should have. Why don't we have a Twitter?
Because I don't
We
really
have an
like
Instagram.
Twitter.
What would we say?
I mean, I don't like Twitter either,
Twitter
but-
sucks. I hate Twitter.
That's why we don't have
I
one.
mean,
It just
yeah, that's absolutely
Because
fair.
I monitor
It just
all of our
stresses me.
socials and I hate Twitter.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, general thoughts on season 2?
Yeah.
Not to brag or anything. I mean, we are taking this time to literally just reminisce about our own show, but I mean, I would say naturally season 2 was better than season 1 because we felt more comfortable than most of season 1. I'm happy with how it went.
Yeah, I also thought season 2 was delightful. I think we learned a lot about like how to plan and like do things in a way that kinda. And
We made a new intro. We made a new outro in season 2.
Standardized a few things. I think our intro writing has continued to progress. I love whenever one of you guys are writing like either like an intro to an episode or even the description on the YouTube video, like just the surprise of what's gonna come out of any of that. Yeah, good on us, season 2. I'm proud of the work we put out.
Yeah, same here. Obviously season 2 better in quality, and I will say I definitely feel more comfortable speaking as the seasons have gone on, which was one of my big goals, because
Good.
I don't know if you can tell, but I have a lot of trouble getting what's in my head out and also just keeping things in my head. So this is great practice. I've had a lot of fun doing it. I did enjoy when we were doing it weekly. It was crazy to be in that kind of swing of things.
Yeah.
It made this kind of gain a new level of importance in my brain, just being like, okay, gotta keep this on a weekly schedule. And it's also fun to kind of look back on some of the earliest seasons of my favorite like big famous podcasts and see them fucking around, and I'm like, oh my god, that's what we do. Like, this is exactly like our podcast. And so that's also been a fun way for me to get back into some of my favorite podcasts from the beginning, because now I almost see us in them or them in us, which is very fun. But yeah, no, it's been a great time. We've watched some really good movies this season. I think I feel like I discovered a lot.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I think our playlist of movies from season 2 has been so interesting and like diverse in terms of like stuff. So
we started a lot of new sub-series.
New sub-series, new segments.
Segments, we introduced snippets.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Okay, so should we go around now?
Sure.
Start with worst.
Ooh, okay.
Move to positive as we I think I have my answer, but I'm gonna
let me just do another quick.
Okay, I can go first because I did this before we started because I'm prepared.
I just want to make sure that my worst is actually my worst.
Yeah.
So you go ahead first.
Yeah, I will say I found it hard to pick a least favorite. It's like picking a least favorite child, because we work, I would say, almost equally hard on all of these.
The fuck does that? Oh! I thought for a minute I thought you meant like
between the three of us. No.
Yeah, I was like, are you like throwing shade at us?
No, as a group,
no, you mean on the episodes.
Regardless of if the movie is good or bad, I feel like I still try to put in the same effort.
Okay.
But yeah, and picking a least fave, I'm always like, okay, do I say it's the least fave because of our discussion or because of the movie itself was bad? So I don't know if I could pick a favorite. Classic me, I'm gonna give you 3. So one of my least favorites, which is technically in this season but feels like a million years ago, is probably Cats. I don't even know if technically that was probably mentioned in our last finale. But
that was early this season.
Okay. Yeah, that's early season 2.
Yeah, so Cats was rough, not gonna lie. Just because for me, it's just so deeply linked to COVID, and also it's fun to watch in the right settings, but then you go to talk about it and there isn't really much to say, so that one was a little bit rough. And then another least favorite that I personally didn't like was the Hell or High Water or Wind River, just because like that was more the movies. While they
Right.
were both fine, just westerns definitely not my thing. I did find Wind River really triggering, and I just feel like I didn't have that much to contribute to the conversations about them. And then the Before trilogy, which really surprised me because that was something I was really nostalgic about, and rewatching them, like, that part of the experience was my least favorite because I was realizing that I didn't really like them anymore, and that always kind of sucks. So that's why that is one of my least faves.
Yeah, I would also say the Before trilogy, purely because I was disappointed at just how much I didn't enjoy the movies.
Yeah.
That's really the only reason. But my honorable mention is the I'm Thinking of Ending Things episode, again, because of how garbage that fucking movie was.
But I had so much fun making that episode.
It was still fun to record.
Yeah.
It's just the movie experience for that one.
That I absolutely get that.
I think, this season, my only, like, negative episode experiences were because of, like, the movies that we watched sometimes.
Which we do to ourselves, sometimes knowingly.
Of course. True.
Just for fun.
Okay, yeah. So I'll reiterate everything you guys said. I think honorable mention, the Before trilogy, like, that one for me was more the watching of the movies in preparation, because I was like, oh, like, it was just that, like, my heart sunk, so I was like, I'm gonna hate these, and then, we had to watch them. But that's okay, because at least you guys were all on the same page, and I do think that was a really good discussion, even though
it was.
That all ended up happening. Now, this is gonna be a shocker. And this, much like in season 1, if you guys remember, the episode that I picked from season 1 was The Shining and Doctor Sleep, and it was mostly because that was, like, the internet issues of us trying to record, and it was just, like, a very hard experience to get into a good groove. And so, like, because the recording experience of it was kind of rough, I was like, fuck it. So for me, for this one, it's actually going to be the Shrek Cinematic Universe episode. Now, I love the concept of this, and I do think the episode actually turned out quite good, and I am happy that it exists. I'm happy we got a negative comment on it. That makes me the fact that someone went to bat.
Hey, we're getting feedback.
Someone went to bat for Shrek 4, and that makes me so happy. And if you're listening, like, respect that you love Shrek 4 that much. The reason I picked this is because at the time I was working 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. shifts in Dearborn and having to wake up at like 4 in the morning. And then I would get home from the shift and eat dinner and watch a Shrek movie and then sleep. And I did that like every night. And then on the 5th night, we recorded the episode. And I was like this close to cracking. Like I was going to have a mental break. Like I was so fucking tired. And I think like whatever, the comedy of it came through. And I think that episode is really funny. But when I think back on this season, that was the one time we went to record something where I was like, what have I done? Like, we should have just postponed this. It's just Shrek movies. But, yeah, so
that was our last one of the year.
Yeah, so we really could have just postponed it. I don't know why we didn't, but...
And then we started the year with our selections episodes.
Yeah.
Okay, so favorites now. Carol, do you want to go first?
Sure, okay. Yeah. So I have 2, and then a couple of honorable mentions.
Great. So 4.
Can't make decisions.
I think I have an honorable mention.
I have honorable mentions for this too.
Okay, so my number 1 favorite. Okay, I'll rank them. Does that make it better? My favorite. Sure. This is the really the question you're asking me, but I'm giving you more details as I do. My favorite was Bo Burnham. Simply because, I mean, 1, I love Bo Burnham. 2, I loved an excuse to watch all of his stuff again. And also I think we had a really good discussion, even though it wasn't entirely about Bo Burnham. I just remember coming out of that and being like, yeah, what a good talk with my friends. So I look back on that fondly, and it is also a plus that for some reason it's one of our most viewed things ever.
It is.
So that's still really interesting to me. But yeah, so that's definitely my number 1 favorite. And then a close second is my 420 episode, simply because I've never had to put less thought into an episode in my life. And that was just a great experience to get high and talk. And then, especially since I was recording it with my roommate, so it was just 1 mic track to edit. So for that reason, the whole experience, start to finish, was the least I've ever had to work for this podcast, and it was great. And then honorable mentions to Midnight Mass, wow, and then Whiplash and La La Land, simply because I really enjoyed either discovering or rediscovering those films, and the pairing of Whiplash and La La Land to me was so perfect, and I just had a great time watching and discussing it. So yes, those are my honorable mentions.
One of my honorable mentions is also the Bo Burnham episode. I really like where that conversation went. Like you said, it started out to be specifically about Bo Burnham, and then it sort of expanded into a larger conceptual discussion,
which all the fans are here for.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a catch-22, but I like personally when we're able to not just like literally analyze a thing we're watching and also extend the conversation to what it means or a larger concept. And then one other honorable mention, I would probably say Midnight Mass as well, but my actual favorite is the non-MCU Marvel garbage. I think that is maybe our funniest episode to date.
Those intros were amazing.
Yeah, the intros all the way to the end with our Fame 4 stick discussion and Marco talking about like 5-year-old drawings in comparison to the early era of comic book movies. It's all gold.
It's really good. Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Carol singing Evanescence is maybe the funniest thing. Fantastic. Like that clip, like if that doesn't end up on the season 3 intro, like I don't know.
I got to start thinking about
we've done something wrong, because I think that is legitimately the funniest thing that's ever happened on the podcast. Okay, so I'm going to start with honorable mentions. I have to throw the Dark Knight trilogy in there because that was like 6 hours of podcast recording. It was like 4. It was like 4.5 hours. But that was a lot of fun. I think it was also...
It was 5.
Oh, yeah, it's 5. Yeah, I'm just looking at it right now.
It was over 5.
But obviously those movies are, like, as a Batman fan, very important to me. And we all also love those movies. Again, like, it's... And I think that was the first thing we ever recorded in person, if I remember correctly. Was it?
All of us, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, Dan and I have recorded stuff before. But yeah,
just the Spider-Man one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was just a lot of fun. And I just had a really great time doing that. I'm glad we got to. I also want to give some honorable mentions to pretty much any of our guest episodes. Mm-hmm. So, like, for example, the James Bond episode with Angelo, I had no idea how that was going to turn out, because, like, just reading rankings off a list, especially a list of 20 movies, like, could be kind of boring. But I felt like immediately when that episode started, I was like, okay, like, we got it. It's going to be good. And it was just a lot of fun. I know, like, a lot of people, personally, I know that haven't listened to the podcast before, like, specifically check that one out because they were like, oh, like, this is interesting and there's a new James Bond movie coming out. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of what we were able to accomplish with that. And then also, obviously, Call Me By Your Brokeback Mountain, having 2 guests on at once. I felt
ambitious.
It worked well.
I think it worked well. I think the conversation was interesting and engaging, and I think it was another great pairing of movies, up there with one of my favorite sort of double features that we've done. Obviously, Carol, your 420 episode, again, I think that works really well. It's always fun to bring in a guest and have new energy on the podcast, because us 3 are predictable.
I was really waiting to see how you were going to end that sentence.
I didn't. You know what? That was a Michael Scott. Like, sometimes I start a sentence before I know where it's going to end. Okay, so I think those are my... Oh, okay. One more honorable mention for me. Sticking with this Batman theme. The Batman the Animated Series and Batman Beyond episodes that Dan, Angelo, and I did. Again, those were just, like, such cozy recordings. Just, like, sitting in my house at night talking about Batman for 6 hours after, like, we had watched all that stuff together. It was just a lot of fun. And I'm glad, again, that we got to do that. It's something I've been wanting to do on the podcast. So those are all my honorable mentions. Oh, and American Psycho, but mostly just for the memes. Just because I'm glad you guys finally understand my jokes. I think my favorite episode of this might be Ingrid Goes West.
Interesting.
Because I've always loved that movie. I loved how much you guys both really love that movie as well. I think of that trilogy of 3 that we did, you both ranked it as your number 1. Because we did Ingrid, Kid Detective, and Promising Young Woman.
Yeah.
And I think it was at least number 1 of, like, watchable. Like, we all agree Promising Young Woman is important.
Yeah.
But then also just, like, the seal jokes that we were making in the podcast, and then me being absolutely unhinged in the edit, and just the constant interjections of Kiss from a Rose.
And Julia Fox.
Like, it's just, like, that episode is so fucking unhinged.
It is.
And it is up there with me with the MCU episode as just being one of my, like, favorite things ever. Like, it just makes me laugh when I think about that episode, and I'm really proud of it. And I think people should go listen to it. Also, I just shout out to Dan for doing a fantastic edit, obviously, on our like Batman predictions video.
Thank you,
because I think that video is also great.
Yeah.
I think we really like got across the Red Letter Media like evocative of that that style of video that we were trying to do. But
yeah,
like,
that's definitely that's like a whole different category.
Absolutely, like it's not a main line. It's totally the separate weird thing
Right.
that we decided to do, and I think it worked out great. That one's up there. But yeah, I mean, I think season 2, nothing but bangers. You know what I mean? Like even looking at this list right now,
I will say it's always fun whenever there's episodes where sometimes there are guests and maybe one of us isn't in it. Because then if there's episodes that I'm not in, I then listen to them as a fan, and I'm like, oh, sick, I'd actually listen to my own podcast if I wasn't on it, because I enjoy this so much. So that's always really fun.
I totally agree. Like when I was listening to the 420 episode, I was like, oh, this is so fun to like not know where the conversation is headed, but still have that same energy that our podcast always has.
Exactly.
So it was really good.
Because like so many times, if I'm editing or even just listening back to an episode, and it comes to a part where I'm talking, being me, like I immediately predict every word that I'm about to say.
Yeah,
exactly. I was like,
if I was in this
not only because
situation, I would say.
yes, not only because I was there, but because I know how I talk.
Yeah.
And I know what word I'm going to use for a specific idea. So it was nice to listen to that one and not having taken part in the conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, so are we ready to jump back into topic here?
All right.
Harry
1
Potter.
hour in, let's go.
Another classic FFW move.
It's going to be a long episode.
Yeah.
That's right. It's fine.
Does anyone have an idea how to structure this discussion? Because I sure don't.
So, obviously, we're not going to talk about the story beats of all 8 of these movies for 2 reasons. Obviously, one, it's not necessary. Almost everyone ever has seen these movies and are familiar with them.
Or is just even aware culturally of like,
And second of all, it's just unnecessary. Like, we're here to talk, one, about Carol's new experience coming to the series for the first time, and 2, about, for us, as a retrospective to it as a whole. So, we're not going to bother, starting at the beginning of the first movie and slowly working our way up to the end of the last movie. We can, if you want, start with the first movie and try to go in order, just with your opinions of how the movies played out, Karolina. But I think that's the most orderly structure we're probably going to get with this.
And we'll go. It's like jazz. We'll go with the flow of whatever happens.
I'm really not worried about
filling time.
No, well, or alienating any listeners that might not be aware of what we're talking about.
It's fucking Harry Potter. Everyone knows Harry Potter.
Yeah.
By the way, not talking about any of the Fantastic Beasts nonsense.
No.
Yeah.
We're talking about the mainline series. Okay. So, Carol, I would like to jump off something that you had said in your intro an hour ago now. You had kind of mentioned what a slog the first movie is. Yes. The first 2 movies, I think we can all kind of unanimously agree on, are rough.
Yeah.
Also, the second movie is kind of just a soft reboot of the first movie in terms of its structure, which is probably because, at the time, the writer, who shall not be named, was working out how they wanted to write this fantasy story and, working through plot lines and stuff. So, yeah, it's kind of rough.
I've also thought that, or especially recently, and especially after reading the books, I feel like the second movie was very much, or I guess more so the second book. The second movie was made because there was a second book and so on. But the second book was very much made because of how successful the first one was, and not necessarily to continue this overarching saga that maybe she had already started planning, but it still felt very much like Chamber of Secrets was just sort of, hey, this worked. Yeah. Let's do it again with the same sort of pacing, and it's
a traditional sequel.
Ideal.
It's same characters, they're a little bit older, there's similar situations.
A little bit more complexity, but the storytelling isn't the best. And
But I will say I have a note, even that the first film was a really good intro to everything. It gave you all the backstory you needed really quickly up front. You knew who everyone was, you knew the setting, you knew everyone's relationships to one another. Obviously not including any new characters that you met along the way in the other films. But I will say, as a person who just knew of this culturally, after watching the first film, I was like, okay, I get it. I know why everyone is where they is. I understand. And I really appreciated that. But then once I got that almost immediately, I was like, okay, this can end now because I want to get to the better movies and the action.
Yeah.
And I will, so Carol, you compared it to Hocus Pocus?
Yes.
Yeah, I will agree with you. I think that first movie has very Disney Channel original movie vibes.
You guys ever seen Halloween Town?
Yes.
Yeah.
It reminds me, the first two movies remind me so much of the Halloween Town movies.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I will say, at least with the first movie, I don't necessarily mean that as an insult, because one of the strengths of the franchise, both in the books and the movies, is that it starts off as traditional kids fiction, as something like The Hobbit, like a kid's book, and then progresses into like a very adult story, and it's about characters growing up. And I think that's why it's been so profound for so many people, and people latch onto it, is because you either can grow up with it, or you see the progression of people growing up and it like reminds you of growing up, which I think is the biggest plus of the whole series. But I think for that first movie to feel like a kid's movie, the fact that it's directed by Christopher Columbus, who made like Home Alone,
Which surprised me.
Yeah, a bunch of like kids movies. He's a kids movie guy. That I think it works for me. Like, I don't necessarily enjoy watching it, but I can appreciate what they're going for in terms of the tone and the style. And it does have very like warm, cozy vibes to it.
Does.
Yeah.
Like, it is the coziest, I would say, of just like this warm mood lighting I have going on right now. Like, it's like that's the one where it's like it's Halloween and you want to put on Harry Potter, or Christmas even, because there's the whole section that takes place.
It's
at
very
Christmas.
seasonal.
Yeah.
It is very, and I like that for that first movie. It's kind of just like cute and sweet, and it exists. I think the reason why, at least for me, Chamber of Secrets like feels like such a slog, and it's like, holy shit, like, is this what the rest of the franchise is going to be like? Is because it kind of starts to take itself, like the movie anyway, too seriously, and it starts to like try to mature, even though it's still like a kid's story. And even like the changing color palette is really weird to me, because Chamber is way more like green, I feel like, in its color palette.
Which makes sense, though.
All the snake stuff and all that bullshit. But like,
I associate the color red with the first one.
Yeah, me too.
And then, like green or bluish with Chamber of Secrets.
Me too. And I think it's tough because it's still very clearly a kid's movie. And
It's
so
like they tried to mature too early.
Exactly. It was like, oh, you jumped the gun on this. So I think that's why the second one feels so like weird compared to the first one, which is like, okay, whatever, you're doing a kid's thing.
It is unfortunate that like I said, I don't think any of these movies are bad. But it's unfortunate that like these first two movies, they have so many good qualities about them, and it's just a shame that their enjoyability of like rewatching them isn't the best, because like these movies have probably the best music in the whole series.
Yeah, John Williams, the GOAT.
Yeah, I will
Yes.
say I noticed the score a lot in the first film, and I kept noting that I was like, it sounds like they're playing the score a lot, because I feel like I hear the same music
So
over
good.
and over. Which
gives
is
me
not a bad
chills,
thing,
dude.
'cause it's good music. But
Yeah, it's like, it's so magical.
We'll
Yeah.
talk about, there's a callback in the last movie that brings me to tears like whenever I watch it. But yeah, so the music is at its height. Also, I would say, okay, obviously the CGI is pretty garbage in these movies, but the production design of the physical stuff is at its height also, because one thing to be said about the later movies is they kind of move towards depending heavily on, or more heavily at least, on CGI, and obviously the CGI does get better than it looks in these movies, but there's still, I feel, less of an effort to use practical effects in the later movies. So that is one thing that can be said about the early ones too, is like there's just the look of Hogwarts and Diagon Alley. It's the fact that first time you see Diagon Alley, it still looks incredible to me.
Yeah, it's great.
So yeah, there's a lot of things that these first two movies do actually better than most of the other movies, and it's just unfortunate that the viewing experience makes me want to rush through them every time I rewatch, just so I can get to the third movie where, in my opinion, it starts to get like way better.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. I mean, the third movie directed by Alfonso Cuarón, who was like a
visionary director.
Yeah, I was gonna say a real director. I mean, Christopher Columbus is a great director, but Alfonso Cuarón is like Oscar-winning visionary director, and that's where the themes get more mature, and then you start introducing side characters that are some of my personal like favorite characters in the entire franchise.
And like from the first shot after the title, you instantly see the cinematography has gotten so much better.
It's night and day. Yeah, it's not a kids movie anymore.
No.
I want to talk about sort of the production design quickly, because you brought it up. I also think like the production design of these movies and of the whole world, Carol, to your point about like all the world building and stuff, like I just think it's so well done. Hogwarts is so unique and like so specific, and it's such like a cool place, and I just think they completely capture all of that.
It's also cool, sorry to cut you off, that like they were able to use a practical castle, but it also like there's that image of, I think it's at the back of the Chamber of Secrets book, where you see Hogwarts, like the towers, and it looks so similar to what they were able to get for the movies.
Absolutely.
And I know obviously the wide shots are CGI, so like, those are going to look similar, but the practical castle that they were able to film in it's a great stand-in for Hogwarts.
They killed it. They killed it with what they were able to do there. And I think a lot of that probably has to do with the fact that she who shall not be named was writing based on where she's from, and so they were able to kind of use a lot of those locations as reference, and she was probably using that as reference when she was writing, so it's kind of like it works out.
If these ever become movies, we're going to film there. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, it's, you know, to have that practical reference. One criticism, not criticism, but more like one of those things that it just, to me, as like someone that likes franchises and serialized stories, kind of like tickles my brain in the wrong way, is I just hate shifts in canon in the production. And I don't know like how this feels for you guys, but I've always hated that, even though I love how they changed the production of everyone having unique wands in the third movie. Like, I love how everyone's wands are specific, and for the rest of the series, they are exactly their wands. But in the first two movies, the wands are these very generic, like looks like you went to a costume store and bought a wand.
Except for Harry's, of course.
Of course.
Because it has to be.
But even Harry's is
Just
different from what it is in the third movie.
I thought, isn't it the same for the first four movies? And then, starting with the fifth movie, he has a different wand for some reason that I've never been able to understand.
No, it shifts.
Why.
I think it shifts in the third movie.
Okay, well, is that the one where he starts with like the brown wand with the handle? Because the first one he gets is that black, like skinny one, right?
I didn't
yeah,
even
it's the
notice a
black
change
one.
in actors, so I have nothing to
Yeah, I
contribute
know.
to this
Yeah, I mean,
conversation.
that's right.
This is something that I noticed after watching the movies, like, I don't know how many times. So, like, but yeah, there's one point in the series where he just has a new wand, and it's seemingly for no reason other than just, like, a production designer wanted to change the look of his wand or something.
It's definitely okay, at a minimum, it's the fourth movie, because Voldemort has the white version of that wand.
Yes.
So at minimum, that's the movie where it's that wand and then it's that wand the rest of the movies. But I can't remember if it shifts in the fourth movie or in the third movie.
Okay.
I thought it was the third because I remember distinctly being like, as a kid watching the movies, like, why does the third movie feel like a completely different movie? And then even down to the fact that everyone's wands look different. So I think it's the third, but it could be the fourth. But regardless, I know what you mean. At one point, it does just shift.
Yeah, I've always just
different.
wondered, like, is there a detail? When did he lose his wand at some point and I missed it?
No, I really do think it's more like Alfonso Cuarón coming in and being like, why did these wands look like they were bought from a prop store for $2? Like, we have production value now. These movies are a success. Like,
now, yeah.
The book series is phenomenal. Let's actually put some money into this.
Yes, and actually that makes sense because I read that Alfonso Cuarón, when he came on, even speaking to the costuming,
yeah.
like he told the kids to dress how they think their characters would dress. Like,
yeah.
They could like untuck their Hogwarts shirts. They could roll up their sleeves, especially in the scene where they're outside.
Yes.
At Hagrid's lesson, it would make sense because it's like it's warmer out there,
yeah.
so they would probably want to like take their sweaters off and their cloaks off and stuff.
Absolutely.
Rather than wearing these black Hogwarts outfits all over the campus, right? So that was cool. It added some variation to the costuming as well.
Yeah, and that speaks to, I think, what is like my favorite kind of thing about the series as a whole, which is I think the plots of everything are fine. Like, okay, they're not fine. They're better than fine. Like, they're good. Like, it's obviously well plotted. The stories are good. Everything's good. But I think what always resonated to me, and it's even more so in the books. In the movies, it's more done visually, like you said, with them being able to adjust and like have their personality and their costume as they get older. But I always liked just the dynamics of like the students being students, because it feels like that very Richard Linklater-y thing of like real life.
But you hate
like,
that.
I if you remember from that episode, I hate it when it's actually real life. But I think in this idea of Hogwarts being this like magical school,
yeah.
It's cool in the books in a much larger extent, but in the movies as well, to have these people just be kids, and they're just like, I gotta go to this fucking class, and then I have to do this thing, and like...
I also love that. Like at some point, they start, like, in the Gryffindor common room, there's just, like, Muggle music playing
yeah.
on a radio. I love that, those little touches like that.
Me too, and I do think that's part of the reason why the third movie, and obviously, this will probably be reflected in the rankings, but it kind of stands out as such a shift in the franchise, and why, Carol, when you texted us and you were like, the first movie's 2.5 hours, and we were like, Carol, just get to the third movie, please, is because that's when you really start to feel like the personality of the students come through, as opposed to like, this is just a safe kids movie.
Yeah.
Where like everyone's in their like cute little uniform and they're just doing kid things. Like, it's not like that anymore after that, which is some of my favorite stuff in the franchise.
But I will say, because in the first movie they were 11, which I didn't realize it started so early. yeah, as much as I did still hate watching it, it did kind of make more sense to me that, like, okay, I am watching these actual children.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm not going to be into it. Like, what happens when you're 11? Literally nothing.
Nothing, yeah.
I mean, for wizards, maybe different story. But having those ages
when
assigned...
we were 11, we would
It
have
makes
to learn
sense.
magic. That would have been a lot better.
Yeah. So I kind of gave it, like, grace for that reason, too, where I was like, okay, I'm probably not going to be into any plot line for the first 2 movies because I don't care which 11-year-old has crush on another 11-year-old.
Yeah.
And obviously, since we're following this specific cohort of kids, we can't really focus on, like, the older kids in Hogwarts because we are not really going to be introduced to them for any reason.
Yeah, and on that topic too, the third movie is where we start getting a history of the older characters as well.
Yes.
Not just the students.
Yeah.
You know, we start the background of, like, we get into Snape and Remus and Sirius. That's
the best stuff.
so good. There's, like, you can split it up into, like, the kids' generation of, like, the next generation of the war that's happening, and then what happened, like,
their parents' generation.
a decade ago. Yeah. It's great.
That's some of the most bittersweet for me. Bittersweet stuff for me, because you get a little bit of it in the movies, but it's always like that stuff was so strong for me in the books, especially in the third movie, and then in this not the sixth movie, but, like, in the third movie, in the seventh movie, and then even a little bit in the fifth one, when Snape is giving clemency lessons or whatever. All of that stuff of, like, Harry's dad and his friendship with Sirius and Lupin and fucking the rat guy. Wormtail, and there's someone else I'm forgetting, right? Or is it just...
No, it's the 4 of them, and Snape was, like, the one that they
and then, like,
a lot.
Snape obviously being this, like, outcast asshole, and, like, that whole relationship. And we should get into Snape. Like, I hate internet criticism constantly wants to dunk on Snape and, like, people that like the character of Snape, and I'm like, oh my god, you guys are idiots. But
he's, like, literally one of the best aspects of this entire series.
Oh no, but okay, we'll get there. We're gonna put a pin in that. I promise I have a rant to go on about that. But
a rant.
Rant, yeah. But, like, that all of that stuff is so strong, and to me, like, I always love. It's the classic, like, if you're gonna have, like, a coming of age story about a guy, there always has to be some idea of, like, living up to his father's expectations. Like, that is all men know how to write about is their fathers. That's it. Like, no man knows how to write about anything else. But I think this does such a good job of playing with that trope and of, like, Harry's parents being these idealized people or whatever, and then the more you get into the story, and especially in the third book, again, it doesn't come through as much in the movie, but that Harry's dad and their friends, while, like, charming and sweet and nice people, were also just adolescent boys at one point and were assholes.
Yeah, bullies.
And, like, having to reconcile with that, especially because everyone is constantly like, you're just like your dad, and him having to come to terms with the fact that, oh, my dad was, like, a jock asshole, kind of. And I know what that feels like because I grew up being bullied all the time. Like, that little character thing is really cool, and I think the way it slowly comes out, like, through flashbacks and whatnot, is really well done. Like, they don't reveal their hand too quickly with any of that.
No.
Yeah, I was gonna just say, because you mentioned Snape, that is one plot line throughout all the films that kept me guessing, because he was such a central figure the whole time, and because I was on Tumblr, I could never tell if he was a good guy or a bad guy. And obviously the movies, with no context from the books, also kept kind of giving you the back and forth, with all his, like, weird looks to Harry Potter at the beginning, even though obviously he's on Dumbledore's side and Dumbledore trusted him, and that was so explicit, but he was always so distrusting of Harry, and you didn't know why. So I did find myself with every new movie being like, okay, wait, is he ultimately good or ultimately bad? Because I have no fucking idea. For the longest time I was like, no, he is ultimately good, he's doing it all for a good reason, and then he, like, quote unquote killed Dumbledore. I mean, he killed Dumbledore, but, like, he was gonna die anyway. But then that happened, and, like, with the movie following, he really also, like, didn't seem to feel bad about it. So I was like, wait, has he been evil all along and I've been duped? And that was a fun, like, roller coaster to go on as a complete outsider. And one of the reasons that I kept returning, because obviously I wanted to know the outcome of the overall battle of good versus evil, but I knew how that ended specifically. So those, like, smaller character arcs was one of the things that kept me wanting to come back to finish my second half of movies.
Absolutely. And I just want to touch on a couple things. Like, whether it's with Harry's dad, whether it's with Snape, one of the major themes throughout all the books and movies is this idea of like morally gray. Like nobody is really actually, with the exception of Voldemort, really like a straight up hero or villain. Like there really aren't very many like caricature characters. Like there are, especially like in the movies, like Cho basically only exists to be lusted after. That's kind of the case in the books as well, but even like there's a bit more depth to her in the books, and I would say all of the characters really, it's cool that they don't ever like really fall into that like classic caricature of just, I know exactly what you are. Like most of these people, you don't know exactly what they are, and they all have moments of being assholes, because like everyone is an asshole at some point, and like all three of our protagonists at one point or another are dicks. Like Snape, even though he's a hero, is a dick and a bad person, and that's part of why he's such a compelling character and my favorite character. Dumbledore is a piece of shit. Like at the end of this, that's why he's compelling too. Like it's so cool, and it's so
even more so in the book.
I said for years, I'm like, Dumbledore's an ass. Like anyway, but
it's cool because like with Dumbledore, like Harry was 11 when he entered this magical world, and a lot of the other kids were too. So you see Dumbledore and you hear about like how amazing of a wizard he is, and you grow up thinking, wow, like I should idolize him. He's someone to look up to. And then you get older and just realize how everyone has a past, and like you have no idea what he did just because now he's praised as being a very powerful, prestigious wizard teaching at this school. So growing up and learning what the mistakes that he's made, especially when he was a younger kid, like Harry, that was cool. And that is a shame that they didn't really find time for that in the movies, but I understand it. Like most of the movies did a pretty good job of condensing the most important book information into like a 2.5 hour screenplay. So
I agree. We've talked a lot about, and I would be so interested in seeing like what the Game of Thrones HBO style 10 episode series version of like each series is one book, just because again there is so much of that fun like high school, we're just students hanging out, that you have to cut, otherwise these movies would be like 6 hours long. But then at the same time, a part of me is like, don't ever touch this franchise again. And like going back to like Alan Rickman as Snape is maybe like one of my favorite film performances / castings ever. I mean, like when he passed away, that was like one of the saddest moments of my life. I was like, holy fuck, like I can't believe Alan Rickman died. Like he just felt like this otherworldly like actor being, I don't know. So it was
shortly after the finale too, wasn't it?
It wasn't that long after, and so it would be so unfortunate, and like all the kids are so iconic in the roles too. Like I don't ever want them to reboot or touch this, because I feel like maybe you get more accuracy, but I think they did a good enough job, and I think so much of the emotion comes through that just leave it alone forever.
And we still have the books.
Yeah, we still have the books.
But I will also say, in Stranger Things, that was your least favorite part, when they did just high school shenanigans.
Okay, but
it can be done well, and it can be done like Stranger Things.
I'm so glad you brought up Stranger Things. We're talking a lot about Stranger Things on this episode too. Here's the difference for me, right? Every time in the books or the movies, these students, like I'll say third movie on, the first two obviously are kids' movies.
There's probably not much more to say about the first two.
We're kind of done with the first two, other than the fact that the second movie gets so badly retconned.
We'll talk about that.
We'll talk about later.
Passing,
The problem with Stranger Things, I think, that Dan and I had is not so much the idea of like them being students and having high school shenanigans. It was that I think what works so well about the first season is what works so well about the later Harry Potter movies, which is like, this feels so fucking real. Like the way the kids interact with each other feels real. It doesn't feel like a cliche high school story. And I think so much of what works about these movies and the books is those little moments and like the dumb fights that people get into, but in a very real way. Like in the fourth movie when Ron and Harry are fighting, but it's a very like passive aggressive fight. Like nobody hits someone over the head with a like roller rink skate. You know what I mean? Like they just don't talk. And then like Ron's like, hey, I was being a dick. And he's like, yeah. And then they just like move on with their lives.
Sure.
It also it resolves pretty early into the movie.
Yeah. And it just there's no, I never find myself having to ask or say, why is anyone acting the way they're acting? Like when Elle in the newest season of Stranger Things, spoilers, is giving like a talk about her recently passed away father, in front of the class, because the classes give a presentation about their heroes, and so she gives a talk about who she thinks is dead, but he's not. But anyway, she gives a talk about him, and she's like, this is my dad, and he's my hero, and I love him. Like, I have known bullies in my life. You have to be like a soulless devil person to laugh and berate a person in front of the class for talking about their dead father at the age of like 12. Sure, like, that is like the most fucked up, unbelievable shit ever.
And then the teacher doesn't even like do anything.
And then the teacher doesn't do anything about it. And so for me, it's like Harry Potter's so antithetical to that. Like, not to jump too far ahead, but in the 5th movie, when Umbridge is this over the top dictator-esque person, like, you see teachers stand up to her. Like, McGonagall stands up to her and is like, this is bullshit. You're acting like a way a person shouldn't act. Dumbledore stands up to her and is like, oh God, the sickest scene where she's like, you may have the authority to fire her, but I'm still headmaster, so you can't dismiss her off the grounds. And it's like, you get her, Dumbledore. Like, that's the way people act in real life. Like, people don't throw each other under the bus in ridiculous, dramatic circumstances, usually. So, I don't know. Like, that to me is why this stuff works so well. It's just because it feels so real. Like, it feels like people hanging out and talking.
Even, like, in the 6th movie, my least favorite part of that movie is the love subplot with Lavender Brown. But it's again, not where, like, you're not like, I don't know why Ron is doing this. Like, he's just, he's in love. Well, I wouldn't call it love. It's like infatuation, but it's just something.
A girl paid attention to him
part of
for
his
the first
life.
time.
Yeah.
Relatable, you know what I mean? I get that,
Yeah, okay, so before we go further, I want to talk about now the 2 Dumbledore actors.
Okay, yes.
Because we're moving over to the 3rd movie. We kind of have already, but that's where the switch happens anyway. So, having read the books now.
Yeah.
First of all, I like, as unfortunate as it was that
Richard
Harris passed away, I do think Michael Gambon's performance is overall better.
Yeah.
It feels like his heart was in it more. As for the accuracy, though, when I was reading the books, and this is me having seen the movies before having read the books, so the whole time I was kind of imagining like a blend of the 2 performances, where you have the warmth of Richard Harris's performance, but the energy of Michael Gambon's performance.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the book Dumbledore that I envisioned when I was reading. What about you?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think people love to pick one or the other. Neither of them, I think, fully captures it. I think Richard Harris is, like you said, he's very warm, but he's like clearly this old decrepit man. Like, he never comes across as powerful.
Yeah.
Even if it's reserved powerful, like, that's fine. But he never brings that across at all. He just feels like a grandpa the whole time. And, you know, I couldn't imagine him going toe-to-toe with Voldemort in Order of the Phoenix or any of that. And then also, I think a part of me, again, like, I think having read the books and getting to the end of it, like, I do really have such a chip on my shoulder, but, like, no, like, Dumbledore is kind of, like, bad, like a bad person. Like, he's done bad things. And so the idea of this warm, loving Dumbledore that a lot of people seem to, like, latch onto, which I guess maybe, like, it would get that juxtaposition across more, and, you know, that's a choice. But I have always preferred Michael Gambon in terms of the fact that he does come across as, like, mysterious. Like, is he good? I don't know. He's kind of weird. Like, I appreciate that choice of that performance, even though maybe it doesn't do as good of a job as, like, juxtaposing. And maybe, like, when he's being really isolating to Harry in the 5th movie, I'm kind of like, well, yeah, I mean, I don't know, he's kind of a cold bastard. Like,
exactly.
So it doesn't necessarily, like, it fixes some stuff, but it breaks some other stuff. And I do think, like, the best performance is an amalgamation of the 2, where he has to be warm in moments, but then mysterious and cold in other moments. And I just think it's always like we're either at one extreme or the other. And I mean, it's unfortunate. I do think Ian McKellen would have captured that the best. Like, I just think he is, like, one of the best actors ever, period. And I think even in his performance as Gandalf, he does that. Like, he has those moments of being warm, but then also being kind of weird, and he flips between the 2, like, so seamlessly. And
to the point where, like Frodo just wonders, like, how much does he know about the world that I don't?
Absolutely.
Which is a huge aspect of the Harry Dumbledore relationship.
Yes, and then he also, like I was saying, has the ability to come across as, like, reserved powerful. Like, he is this, like, old silly man doing tricks or whatever, but then when he fights the Balrog, you're kind of like, yeah, I mean, he's a badass. Like, okay.
And you don't doubt it for a second.
I don't doubt it. I buy him as a badass. And so I just think it's like, yeah, like, neither of them fully gets it.
Yeah.
If we could, like, infuse, like, create a new Dumbledore with the two of them, a hybrid Dumbledore, I think that would be the best one overall. In terms of what the books and the screenplays are trying to get across character-wise.
It's also complicated because the cutoff being that second movie, where, as we talked about, that's a cutoff for more than one reason, because after that the movies get darker and a lot, like, you know, better. But also, seeing Richard Harris's Dumbledore, if he had lived in those future movies, would not have fit, and also seeing Michael Gambon from the start would not have fit.
Yeah.
So yeah, that hybrid would have been probably like so perfect, just if we would have been able to have one consistent actor with that sort of hybrid accuracy throughout the whole thing, that would have been cool to see. I mean, it's just something that you can't help but wonder about.
Absolutely.
So overall, though, which performance do you prefer?
Probably Michael Gambon. Just because, again, I think at the end of the day, if I have to pick between the two, I think Dumbledore is an asshole, and I think I would rather have a more mysterious, not sure where you stand with him Dumbledore than a fun-loving grandpa Dumbledore. That's where I fall between the two of them. So,
Karolina, I'd ask you, but you didn't even realize.
I will say I noticed in the 5th movie when he wasn't talking to Harry, and I was like, that's mean. That I picked up on.
Glad you picked up on that. Yeah. Glad you picked up on the central theme of the 5th movie.
But also, if I did have to pick, I'd pick the second one, because I guess it must be the one I remember the most if I watched it for more time.
That's true.
Fair enough.
There's one more thing before we could probably move on to the next movie. We should probably at least briefly talk about the time travel mechanics of the third movie. I'm still a little bit confused. So, in this universe...
Hermione, or just in general?
Just how time travel works in this universe. So is it that the time travel has always happened if it happened?
Yes.
And you have to do it it's like a recursive thing?
Yes, it has to happen because it happened. It's Terminator. Have you
I've
guys
never seen Terminator.
No.
Great. In Terminator, in the future, John Connor sends this guy named Kyle Reese back in time to protect his mother from a Terminator, because the Terminators are sending a Terminator back in time.
How many times can you say Terminator in one sentence?
To kill his mother so he can't be born. Because he's the leader of the resistance in the future. And so the Terminators are like, we're going to kill his mom. So he sends back his frontline soldier, Kyle Reese. He's like, you're my best soldier. You have to go back to protect my mom. They end up hooking up, and that's how she gets pregnant with John Connor.
Oh.
So it's a recursive timeline.
And does he know that?
That breaks my brain.
You find out that he does know it, and that's why he sends him back.
It's pretty fucked up.
It's cool. I think this is the same. It has to happen because it's always happened. It's a recursive timeline.
Yeah. So if it
I
happened, everything would be different.
So I always wonder, though...
The problem is, when you get into time travel discussions, is that it's all bullshit. But, it's obviously, like, what physicists will tell you is that, well, we perceive time as, like, a linear thing, so it doesn't make sense to us how there could be a recursive timeline. But if you don't perceive time linearly, and every point in time is simultaneously always happening, then, it totally could be possible to have a recursive timeline.
But, so if Hermione had never gotten the time turner, this never would have even happened.
Yeah.
That's what I've thought. I've never. Every time I watch it, I feel like I'm learning it for the first time again.
I know, because
it's so
confusing.
It's so different than any other time travel thing I've ever experienced.
Well, yeah, because when we do go back and then see everything happening, and they have to in the timeline we're following, when they go back in time, they have to actively make the things happen that already happened. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
Hold on.
And it's cool that that's kind of the third act. Ish.
Yeah.
Like, that whole third act is the redoing of what we saw in the second act.
It's very Christopher Nolan-esque.
This is the most Christopher Nolan movie.
It really is. But it's cool. I think that's part of why, outside of the aesthetics and it obviously being a better made movie, it's part of why it resonates so much with people, because the plot itself is very complex and interesting.
Yeah.
And it's also very twisty, because you wouldn't ever think that there's going to be a time travel plot in a Harry Potter movie.
Yeah.
Although I will say when they pointed out her being in classes suddenly, from the beginning, I was like, okay, something's up.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say.
Something's up.
So I like that they don't just in the third act pull it out of thin air.
No, absolutely not.
Hey, in this magical world, we can also time travel, and we're going to do that now.
No, it's set up and pay off as all stories should be.
And I also even though it probably bothers some people that after this movie we never touch time travel again, because that would first of all make things way too easy, and second of all, even they mentioned in this movie that first of all it'd be really confusing for all the movies. And it's too dangerous. So
now I do know people love to shit on that. They're like, well, I mean, if you have the time, Turner. And I'm like, why would you want to see that, though?
Yeah.
Like I think it's better that we limit it to this one movie. And so, after the 7 books, J.K. Rowling did come back to write not only the Fantastic Beasts movies, but the play Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, which I have on the shelf over there. And I read it, and it is a literal fan fiction novel about Harry's son and Draco's son, and they become friends, and they steal a time turner and go on a Avengers Endgame-esque journey through their parents' past and like change the timeline, and then shit happens, so they have to like fix it. Which also isn't how time travel works in this universe.
No, because it would have already happened.
Yeah.
So it's complete bullshit.
So it's garbage.
Honestly, it's a fun read. Like it is an enjoyable read. It's cool to see like where the characters end up, but just know that you just have to think of it as fan fiction, basically.
Yeah.
Like, because it breaks the
Written
canon.
by the official author of the series.
Who is a terrible playwright and screenwriter.
Yeah.
Well, and I was going to say also she just loves to change the story every so often.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So, I've heard through the grapevine, obviously, but I heard that that's what she's famous for, so...
And not even the story. The most minute aspects of the world.
Isn't Dumbledore gay?
Yes.
Okay, well that one...
Could be important if you,
Important in what way?
It's not that even it's important. That's the only one that I feel like... Even if she hadn't said it, I could have guessed. Like,
sure.
He does kind of... Not that it needed to be said.
Yes.
But it's just something that could be possible. I feel like everything after that was, like, just a snowball effect of, like, I'm going to start... She went full George Lucas.
She did go full George Lucas,
changing
absolutely.
the most unimportant things.
Yeah, so, Carol, this isn't expanded upon too much in the last movies, but in the last book, like, Dumbledore's relationship with Grindelwald and the whole Elder Wand thing, like... is very expanded upon, and there are lots of like innuendos to the fact that they had like a close friendship, like they had a very intense relationship of some form,
sure.
Which is what leads to him getting the Elder Wand essentially. And I mean, we'll get there when we get to it, but that is sort of what sort of Dan's making reference to. And then after it came out, she was like, yeah, he's gay, and everyone was like, okay, cool.
Like, we didn't need that confirmation though.
Yeah, whatever. To go back to Prisoner of Azkaban, like, this movie, I think, nails so many of the things that I love, and one of the things it nails is the casting of Sirius Black, Gary Oldman, who, like, Sirius Black on paper is probably my favorite character in the entire Harry Potter franchise, and I think, like, Gary Oldman is so fucking good, like, in these movies, and it's a crime that he really is only in, like, 1.5 of them.
I was surprised. I was shocked.
Because he's so good.
Yeah.
And I love...
But we owe part of that to the fact that he fucking dies.
Yes.
So it's unfortunate.
Which we have to talk about. That was like one of the most shocking moments of my childhood was when he died. Like reading that. We'll get there. But that casting is so good. And also the casting of Lupin. I forget that actor's name.
David Thewlis.
Yes, that's right.
Yes. He was in, I'm thinking of Ending Things.
Yep.
Yeah. So I was looking.
He's also in.
Yeah, I was looking at the casting, and I was like, "We said David Thewlis in an episode many times. So I remember struggling with his name. Why?"
Yeah.
And I had to look it up.
I love both of those characters in the books. I love the casting of both of them. And I think it's unfortunate, like in the rest of the movies, you don't see it as much, with the exception of 5. But like in the books, like they very much, especially Lupin, stick around as father figures in Harry's life, which I think is like thematically relevant given the fact that like Harry's all about, again, like we talked about, living up to his dad but not really understanding his dad. And so these two characters that were best friends with his dad are effectively his like real uncles.
Yeah.
In a way that like his actual uncle wasn't his uncle. And so,
but it's also like they, having been friends with his dad, are just as gray as his dad was.
Exactly.
And maybe they don't, well, not maybe, they didn't necessarily realize that. So being father figures to Harry, it's almost like leading him down the same unfortunate path that if he didn't come to the realization that Snape later gives him, he could have turned into the type that his father was.
Exactly. And it's almost through those characters getting more of an insight of like what his dad was probably also like, which is, it's really cool. And I think one of the strongest things about the third book to me, and it'll be really interesting, Dan and I are going to rank both the books and the movies. We're all going to rank the movies, but then Dan and I are going to rank the books and the movies. And as much as I like this movie, it leaves out so much backstory about like Harry and Remus and Sirius and Wormtail, like them being the Marauders and making the Marauders map and like all the shenanigans they got up into, and like Snape being like this little prick kid that's like, fuck you guys. Like
Yeah, Snape was also a piece of shit.
Absolutely, yeah. And, like, I think all of that backstory is so cool, and I think it's so important that this is the point at which Harry finally starts to get some context to, like, my dad was up to some stuff. And I also, like, because you get, like, one of my favorite, like, the top 2 moments in all of Harry Potter at the end of Prisoner of Azkaban, which is the moment of him thinking he was saved from the Dementors by his dad.
Oh.
Yeah.
And, like, watching the situation play out with Hermione and being like, my dad's gonna come save me, and her being like, dude, your dad's dead.
Yeah.
Like, he's not coming. And then him having the realization that he has to save himself.
Yeah.
That is, like, literally, like, top 2 incredible moments. And so thematically important to him, like, rejecting who his dad was. Plot-wise is so cool.
It's also, I love that, like, that's the one time in the series where watching it for the first time, you're kind of worried, are they going to retcon that his parents have been alive the whole time? And I'm glad that
Yes.
they're dead from before the events of the first movie on.
Yes. And it's also, like, it's just so well paced of, like, him trying to learn to do the Patronus and not being able to do the full Patronus, and, like, in this moment is the first time he's able to actually do it. And, like,
Because he saw himself.
Do it, and so he knew that he had the ability to do it. He just had to fucking do it. He had to, like, stop waiting to be saved, basically. It's very Batman Begins-esque.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, why do we fall? So anyway, he has to, like, save himself, and he does the thing.
Sorry, when you said the end of that movie was one of the top 2 moments in the franchise, I thought you were referring to the freeze frame at the very last frame of the movie.
No, I was not talking about the
Horrible
shameful freeze frame of Harry flying away on a
The
broom.
worst part of that
The
movie.
fastest broom in the world, you guys.
So fast that it creates a blurry freeze frame. Yeah, it's bad.
It's one of the weirdest choices I've ever seen.
I know, it doesn't fit in this movie.
I will say it seems
But-
like something that they carried forward from the first 2 kid movies. Because
Yeah,
it seems
yeah.
It's like a holdover
silly.
of that.
Yeah. Holdover. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you, Dan. Look
You're
at how
welcome.
well we
No, you're
fill in the blanks.
That's what we do.
That's what we do here.
You're right though. Like, and this is also this third movie. We've talked so much about how there's a cutoff between the first 2 movies and the rest, and I feel like there's also
There has to be
another
some tie-in so it doesn't feel entirely jarring and like a whole
That
new
too.
story.
And
Yeah.
also, I feel like there's another, like, slighter cutoff between the third movie and the rest, because the third movie, I feel like, is the last sort of, like, whimsical
I was just thinking whimsical. I'm so glad you picked that word.
adventure type thing.
Yeah.
The fourth movie starts becoming very serious towards the end. And, like,
Yeah.
this is the first movie where, like, there's a death at the end of every movie going
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's also, there's a few cutoff areas between movies in this series. I think one of them is between 2 and 3, another one between 3 and 4, and then the last one between 4 and 5. And I think the series, especially the movie series, splits up very nicely into 2 halves.
Yep.
The first 4 and the last 4.
I completely
There's
agree.
the 2 different eras of the series.
Which makes sense when you think about it, because of, again, what happens at the end of 4, that, like, the
Yeah.
them
A
back
huge
half,
turning point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the big turning point that everything becomes focused on.
Yeah.
So I completely agree with that. Yeah.
Hey guys, so as you could tell from the title of the video and the fact that this episode is at its end, even though we haven't finished discussing the whole Harry Potter franchise, this is part 1 of the over 3-hour discussion we had. Part 2 is available right now, so if you enjoyed the first part, go check it out. And thanks for listening to the Feature Length Podcast.